all set with a mocha and a cold glass of water. It's going to be a great day.
It's just the water for me.
So we can speak in this part whilst people are coming in, because I would love to talk about Lil Nas X. That's so good.
I got to be honest. Despite I'm not the oldest, but my music taste is a little bit older than my actual age.
Fair enough. Fair enough. Well, he is an absolute icon. So if anybody's joining, and there we go. See, Ross knows. He's amazing. This guy has transformed the music industry. I think he's brilliant.
I've certainly heard the name, but yeah, I certainly couldn't tell you a song.
Fair enough. Well, you definitely recognize them. Yeah, Ross is saying he's a massive icon. I think he has so many lessons that marketers can learn from. The way he promotes his music. He just gave birth to an album. That was how he announced the album. And he made this whole thing. He had kind of visuals of him being pregnant with an album. He had visuals of him giving birth to the album. The whole thing is hilarious. And the way he draws people in, brings them with the narrative, and then boom, drops the album. It's absolutely class.
Interesting. Not something I've heard before.
Let's make a start, guys. Well, welcome everyone to Series 4 of the GBA Lightbulb Sessions. The Great British Entrepreneur Awards, in association with BT Skills for Tomorrow, have designed a free live stream series of Lightbulb Sessions to support small businesses and entrepreneurs with insightful and advice-driven sessions, featuring some of the UK's brilliant entrepreneurial minds to illuminate your path to entrepreneurial success. You can find out more about BT Skills for Tomorrow by heading to their website at www.bt.com/skills for tomorrow, or by clicking on the link in the comment section. In today's session, Great British Entrepreneur Awards Head of Content Jonathan Davis will sit down with the founder of Wow's UK leading personal branding agency, Joe Binder. Joe is trusted with the personal brands of some of the most distinguished entrepreneurs in the UK, including James Caan, CBE, and Tej Lavani. He believes that founders and CEOs have a unique opportunity to build their business through personal branding on social media. Joe will cover the importance of personal branding and the value it provides to entrepreneurs and their companies. There is an opportunity to ask questions during this session. If you have a question you'd like to ask, you can pop this in the Q&A function at the bottom of your screen, and we'll do our best to answer these towards the end of the session. Please note there will be a poll at the end of the session and all answers will be anonymous. And with that, I'll pass over to our host today, Jonathan Davis.
Yeah, thank you, Chloe, and thank you everyone for joining us today, and thank you, Joe, for taking the time to join us and share your knowledge and your expertise. Obviously, Chloe gave a brief introduction to yourself just there, but I wondered if we could start with a little bit more about yourself and the business.
Sure thing. First of all, thank you for the wonderful introduction. My name is Joe. I have awful hay fever today, so if I do sneeze, please just be patient with me. I will get back to you. I got obsessed with social media whilst I was at Cambridge. I started a string of Facebook pages. I then started a YouTube channel and built that up to over 2 million views, over 20,000 subscribers. And then I took those learnings to start Wow. So we are a personal branding agency. We work with people like Tej Lavani, Sarah Davies, James Caan from Dragon's Den. That's on the high profile end. And then we also work with tons of startups who are looking to become the leading voice in their industry. This time last year, there were 2 of us and we were just about to make our 3rd hire. And today there are 10 of us and we're just about to welcome the 11th person to the team. So huge, exciting journey. The personal branding space is really exciting as well. So yeah, that's the intro.
Excellent, thank you. And it sounds like certainly a very exciting past 12 months that you've had. So when most people think of branding, I think it would probably be fair to say that they might think of a logo, they might think of color schemes, they might think of graphics or packaging or storefronts if it's a retailer. What's the distinction between that and personal branding?
Sure. So there are a ton of visual cues within both. You know, how you dress, your mannerisms when you communicate and so on. What I would say is that personal branding is completely different in the aspect that you can connect to people on a human level. So if you look at a platform like LinkedIn, where there is so much corporate noise and so many companies posting things which feel pretty bland and vanilla because they have to fit in with the wider brand guidelines of the firm, personal branding allows you to completely cut through that noise and share things on a human and authentic and emotive level. So I think the main distinction there is the opportunity in connecting with other humans in a genuine way.
Okay, excellent. And so what makes a great personal brand then?
Great question. I love it. I think a great personal brand is one that develops over time. And what I mean by that is so many people are scared about starting in the first place because they haven't made it. But what's really interesting about personal branding and about reputation generally is that it can be shifted and molded over time. So a lot of people go wrong by thinking, all right, I haven't built the company yet. I haven't sold the company yet. I don't have the credibility. So why would I talk and start, shouting business advice online? That doesn't make sense. And that's absolutely right. You shouldn't be doing that if you're just getting started. But what you can do is document your journey and where you're at now. So an example of that is when I was 21 and I started this company, Wow, I put up an article on LinkedIn basically whinging about the lonely reality of being a 21-year-old founder. There was no advice. There were no key takeaways. There was no expertise. I was just opening up, sharing the experience. And somebody commented saying, it's no different when you're 40 years old. Let's grab a drink. Ended up meeting that person and immediately he became a mentor. He was teaching me so much about business. And in return, I was, saying, why aren't you on LinkedIn? Why aren't you on Twitter? And so I started to help him and his team with their personal brand. And essentially within a few weeks, it became clear that James Khan was an investor in his company. And he ended up saying to me, you've got to be working with James. You've got to be working with James. And I remember going in and delivering a leadership wide session on personal branding. And I said, I don't want you to pay me for this. I'm not going to charge you. And I left the session, checked my phone, and there was an email intro to James Khan. And that all came because I uploaded an article whinging about how difficult that specific moment was. So don't know if I answered your question accurately there, but I thought it was a nice anecdote that was related to it.
Yeah, absolutely. So, so there's something that you mentioned there about the advice aspect and people thinking that you need to have been there and done it in your entrepreneurial journey in order to share advice. Do you think that is somewhat of a barrier, or people see it as a barrier to really focusing on the personal branding, that they think because they're early in the early stages of their business and their entrepreneurial journey that they think, well, I haven't achieved anything, I haven't got advice to give, therefore I'm not going to focus on this. So do you think people see it as a barrier, even though it might not necessarily be?
Absolutely. That is a really big barrier because people doubt themselves. If we look at, if you think about all the entrepreneurs who are sitting in the audience, everyone would have doubted themselves in the last year, in the last month, potentially in the last week or day. It's so difficult to get out of it. So the idea of having enough confidence in yourself to share the journey with the world, that is difficult. And it requires a degree of coaching and reassurance from those around you. Another really big barrier to building your personal brand is being British. Right? We are so reserved with how we communicate. We are so against sharing our wins and being our own hype men. And when clients come to us, a lot of the time, that's one of the biggest concerns. They say, I don't want to look like I'm bragging. I don't want to look like I'm boasting. Yes, we did just raise 3 mil, but can I really share that without looking like a bit of a, that's another one. And again, it's a process of becoming your own hype man or hype woman. And it's a process of building the confidence, putting yourself out there and seeing that, no one's going to die. Nothing bad happens. You may get a few WhatsApp messages from your friends kind of taking the piss, but that will last a day. And if you can get through that, then you're good to go.
Excellent. And so something that you mentioned quite early on, the kind of benefit that their businesses can feel as a result of building a personal brand. So talk me through some of those. What are the upsides for the business?
Mm-hmm. There are tons. But if you're thinking about really building your personal brand, you want to really, have a specific strategy in mind. So what we can do, Jonathan, we can take a couple of different examples. So let's say you are, have just raised a seed round and you're about to, gear up, find the right people to join, and then you're going to be scaling fast. You know that you're going to have to hire 30 people over the next few months. First of all, the recruitment fees are going to be a killer. Second of all, finding the culture fit, and also the employer brand element of this. How the hell do you convince people in the first place that they should work with you? That's a difficult thing to do. So in that case, the output, the desired result could be, I want people to join my company. I want them to be excited about it. I want them to come to me. And in that scenario, the brief is then, okay, how do we shout about what we're doing? How do we share our values with the world? How do we communicate our USPs? But ultimately, the goal and the value there is, first of all, people are finding out about what you do, and you will be bringing in, brilliant people to the organization. Second of all, you're going to save a ton of money on recruiter fees. And third of all, you'll be able to create an aura around where you work. If you look at some of the best kind of social media or marketing companies over the last few years, take Social Chain, Stephen Bartlett, take Rise at 7, which is doing bits, amazing, with Carrie Rose. They have created, a glow around the companies where it actually means something to work there. So if your goal is to bring people into the company quickly, then, create that glow and make, the Rise at 7, the Social Chain, have such, power on somebody's CV that they've got to be in your company. So that is one big benefit. It's a brief that a lot of clients come to us with. Another benefit is, let's say, you're sitting in the audience right now and you're working on your first business, but you're 20 years old, you're 30 or 40. This is business number 1. You've got 7 more to start. You've got companies to invest in once you've got a bit more capital. That world is open and, you're so excited about it. Brilliant. You can leverage, you can build your personal brand, and first of all, use that image as leverage for your company to win new business, to win speaking opportunities and so on. But beyond that, what I said earlier about personal branding as a process, you can then shift that beyond. So if you're to build your personal brand in the process of building your first or second company, with the overarching view of you want to invest long-term, you want to start more long-term, by the time you've exited that business, you then have, so many opportunities open to you. It's people who want to work with you, investors who want to invest in your business, people who may want your investment. So if you see it through that lens, then there's also a ton of opportunity. And many, many other cases, if you want to jump into any other examples.
Okay, we can certainly we'll certainly loop back to that if we have a little bit of time there a bit later. But no, that was really insightful. Thank you. What about downsides? Are there any downsides that a business can feel as a result?
Yeah. So, I mean, if you look at bigger businesses where there is already an established reputation to uphold, not just for the C-suite, the executives, but for the brand as a whole, there's always a danger in one individual having that much kind of influence over the business. Take Elon Musk as an example, take Jeff Bezos as an example, or take any of the traditional kind of UK banks. We all know about Elon, we all know about Bezos, but, we all know about Branson, but do we know about this, the CEO of Deutsche, the CEO of HSBC and so on? And perhaps there's a reason for that. Whilst those people are incredibly influential, there's also a ton of danger, realistically, of what if they say something wrong? How will that then get picked up in the press? What are the business ramifications of them doing that? But there are ways that can be avoided. It's important to have a soundboard, and it's also important to remove yourself from the personal branding equation. It's something I've done recently with my team. I don't, I'm not in charge of my personal brand now. I don't set the strategy. I don't post the content. I think about the ideas, I create it with my team, but I'm very much treated as a client now. And the reason for that is because, first of all, team are brilliant, doing a good job, better than I could do. But the really big one is that I'm too emotive. I'm too emotionally involved with my brand. And it's really difficult to detach yourself from that. So I sent a bit of feedback recently to the team. I said, I don't want to say my business. It sounds too possessive. I just don't think it's right. And their response was, look, we've spoken about this. We need to start to show a clear difference between, the nice kid who you made yourself out to be when you're a YouTuber and the up and coming business person. You need to be able to increase your authority. You need to, assert your views and your expertise. So we've got to, start to look at that kind of nice boy as a past thing and slowly, turn into the person you are now. And there's a process with, that comes in terms of the language use. I could not see that. So the fact that they were able to make that observation was really useful, because I'm way too involved to do that. So in terms of those dangers, to link it back, if you have a team around you who get marketing, who get communications, then those dangers could be massively reduced.
Yeah, absolutely. And to kind of play devil's advocate, I imagine that some perhaps more cynical people would look at that and say, is there an issue around authenticity in terms of personal branding? That like I said, to play devil's advocate, in the example that you just gave yourself with you and your team, you're having how you're expressing how you feel and how you want to do things, and you've actually got someone else saying, no, do it this way. So what's the risk there with authenticity?
Brilliant question. So to go back to that specific example, this isn't a case of them saying, Joe, you've got to be somebody else. This is a case of, Joe, you've got to be yourself. I am a certain way. I communicate in a certain way. I say things, with an authoritative tone when I know what I'm talking about, but I wasn't doing it online. So it's actually the opposite. It's more that my offline brand reputation, the way I talk, wasn't aligned with how I put myself online, and it was fixing that and shaping that.
Okay, that's really interesting. Thank you. And so you mentioned a little bit earlier about the number of people, particularly on LinkedIn, that more and more people are considering their personal brand. Is it therefore becoming more and more difficult to actually stand out from the crowd?
100%. 100%. I've got screenshots from posts of mine on LinkedIn from like 3 years ago, and they got like 50 likes and 20 comments, and it had like 20,000 views because no one was posting. So anyone who was posting would have their posts linger on people's news feeds, and it would just stay there. Whereas now, a post with 50 likes and 20 comments is going to get, maybe a couple thousand views. The game has changed, and it's going to continue to do so. People are seeing the clear ROI of building their own brand. And as a result, as you say, more people are flooding in. So you've got to think about how you're differentiating yourself online, and ultimately how you're communicating messages. If we think generally, if you've ever read any of the kind of classic self-help books or business books, a lot of the time, it's all the same thing. They say the exact same thing. It's the same old wisdom that has been passed down for generations, but it's said through a slightly different lens, or it's communicated with a slightly different analogy. It's like, the classic one of, if you judge a fish by its ability to climb a tree, then, the fish is going to think it's a failure. It's like, okay, cool. But there are now 1,000 different versions of that exact same message. So when it comes to communicating things online, it's good to be self-aware and recognize that while something may feel revolutionary to you, there may be an element of, this message is actually a bit cliche. So then think, okay, how can I make this specific to me? So one example is to literally make it specific to you. Talk about the anecdote, talk about the reason that you thought that in the first place, talk about the repercussions of the actions you made, mention the fact that it's a cliche, but this was your experience with it, or just simply think of a new analogy or way of communicating it. I think when it comes to differentiating yourself as a business person on a business platform, you've got to be doing those things. Otherwise, you're going to be crowded out.
Yeah, absolutely. And from personal experience, I think that's something that I see looking through LinkedIn. I actually, as a result, probably actually spend less time on LinkedIn now than I ever have, because it is full of just the repeated messages, as you say there. So in terms of time allocation, how much time do you recommend spend on building your personal brand?
It varies for every person. The challenge here is I don't know who I'm directly speaking to in the audience. We could have people who are desperate to start a business. We could have people who are 10 years into their career in banking and are now thinking about starting their own fintech. We could have people who are leading a team of 300 with a company that they own 100% equity of. So it's a really tough one to answer. What I would say, if you're in the very early stages of your career or of your journey, posting is better than not posting at all. I think if you're really kind of gunning up to, or if you're just before the stage of going all guns blazing for your startup and you want to start to build a little bit of momentum, then I think instead of saying, allocate X amount of time, say, talk about X amount of moments each month. Even if it's sharing 3 moments a month, winning a new client and it was great, or hiring somebody for the first time, or doing a rebrand. Try to share those moments, because these things compound. If you're at all guns a blazing approach, then you want to just go for it. You want to allocate serious time, not just to content creation on LinkedIn and Twitter, but also to, getting onto events, getting some press, maybe even hosting a podcast, things like that, because personal branding is all about opportunity, essentially. What you're doing by putting content out there into the world is creating more, as Ali Abdaal says, more surface area for lucky events to happen. And essentially what it means is you are telling loads of people about what you do. You are telling them that you are the go-to person to do that one thing. So as soon as they think, whether it's in a month or in a year, wow, I need to work on my personal brand, they're going to think, oh, who's that guy who keeps popping up on my newsfeed with the blue photo? And they're going to search for it and they're going to find that Joe Binder. That's the guy. I'm going to message him. So essentially with content, with everything you put out there, you end up drawing people back in. You're essentially creating your own gravitational pull. And that is the best thing to do, whether you're looking to bring people onto your, advisory board or hire new staff. If they can come to you first, half the job's done. Brilliant.
Yeah, that's really interesting. Thank you. And in terms of finding that balance, obviously we're living in a world full of influencer culture, and as we said, that's becoming more and more common in the kind of business and entrepreneurial space.
Mm-hmm.
If there is that real desire, like, right, I'm really going to build my personal brand, it's going to be great for my business, like that's kind of your motivation. Is there a danger that entrepreneurs are actually spending too much time on their personal brand and not enough time on the business? How do you find that balance?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's a really difficult one, because there's always going to be a little bit of ego involved, even if you don't want to acknowledge it, or even if you say, oh, I don't have any ego. If you're putting out content and lots of people are liking it, especially at the start, it feels good. And if you put out content and you get 1 like, it doesn't feel great. So it's definitely something that you can almost get swept away with. And it takes essentially just practice and experience of having that. Before I started this company, I had uploaded over 200 videos to YouTube. I'd had the really awkward and difficult conversations with friends when they sat me down and said, look, I get it. You're excited about your YouTube channel. I understand that you've got 1,000 new subscribers and it's brilliant. And I'm so happy for you. But I've also got things that I want to talk about. I want you to be a friend to me as well. So as much as I love what you're doing, as proud of you as I am, stop talking about it the whole time. So I had that a while ago, a long time ago now. And for me, it's got to a stage where it's like, I just need to recognize that the personal brand is something that I need to be doing, but I can't let it suck out all of my mental energy. I can't let it be the focus of my conversation with family and friends and so on. So to link back to the question of how do you know if you're spending too much time, I think you'll either feel it through, you'll be sitting down and not concentrating because your post is going viral, or maybe if you've got, brilliant and honest friends or colleagues, they may just pull you up on it and say, look, it's great, I'm proud of you, spend the time on it, but you've got a business to run, shit's going wrong, sort it out. So yeah, one thing I will say, Jonathan, if it's all right, is that KSI, as an influencer, I think is just the perfect case study. Ask any 18-year-old who KSI is, they'll call him a YouTuber. Ask any 30-year-old who KSI is, they'll call him a musician. They'll call him a boxer. This guy came from nothing. He sat in his room and recorded FIFA videos. And then a few years later, he is on a collaboration track with Lil Wayne, one of the biggest rap artists on the planet. He is fighting some of the, biggest boxing stars in the world. It is a joke, right? And what we can learn from that is that if you build an audience, you get to shape your narrative. You can do literally anything you want because you are the hype person, you are the newspaper, you are the publisher. So you can, you have the attention. All you need to do is then shape the narrative. And I think he's done it brilliantly.
Yeah, absolutely. Totally agree. I think that's an excellent example and quite interesting. It actually comes outside of the business space. A really important point there about, that it allows you to control your narrative. And that's the case with your social media channels for entrepreneurs as well. Normally I would keep going for a little bit longer, but we've had so many questions come in that I am just going to ask one more before I go to the audience questions. So we've heard a lot about what you should do when building your personal brand. What are some of the things that you really should avoid and shouldn't do?
If you're building your personal brand, do not try to be somebody that you're not actually. Awful wording by me, I'm sorry. Don't try to be somebody else. It's not going to work. Don't worry about oversharing. There will be points if you really go for this and push yourself that you do it. But you've got to take risks, right? And putting things out into the public allow you to quickly learn from them. For example, we had a feature in Forbes recently. We disclosed our monthly revenue. It's like, is that a good idea? Is that really a good idea to say how much money we're making? But I thought, you know what? Let's do it. Let's put it out into the world. And if it's an absolute shit show, then I've learned my lesson and I won't do it again. But it wasn't. It was brilliant. And it worked really well for general kind of publicity and press. So I would say don't worry about oversharing. If it happens and you do it, you'll know quickly and you won't make that mistake again. One other thing I would say about building a personal brand, things to avoid, is don't wait for too long. I get it. I understand how difficult it is when you're not somebody who typically, talks yourself up and is your own hype person. But this stuff is so powerful. Charlie Ironton, one of our senior account managers at WOW, she's recently done a big push. She was on a webinar last night talking about personal branding. And in the last week, she's had 3 people message her about potentially working with her and with us as an agency. It's not just for founders. This is for everyone. All you're doing is taking that one-to-one coffee, that, relationship with your colleague or manager who you haven't spoken to for 3 years, 5 years or 10 years. You're taking all of those little relationships, and instead of having to maintain them on a one-to-one basis over a coffee, over an email, you're just, putting your world and your journey out there so that all of those people can still feel close to you, can still feel updated, and then still know what you're doing and may reach out to work together. So it's really powerful. And the final kind of don't is just don't wait for too long before you decide to just go for it. Perfect.
Thank you. Like I said, we've had so many questions come in, so I will get straight to them. And something that you said there actually leads me quite nicely into one of them. You probably touched on it a little bit, but I wonder if there's a bit of expansion. So this one comes from an anonymous attendee who says that they are in a professional job, but looking to get into another role. How do you build your personal brand without only using the voice that is enabled by the current role?
Okay, so I would first of all challenge that and say, why don't you, talk more about the fact that you're in that role? And then there's a second part to this. So, I mean, if you think about, right, you're sat there in a corporate job, you are working your absolute arse off, right? You are doing everything under the sun so that your manager can see it, so that you can get the raise, so that you can get the promotion. And then after weeks and weeks, nonstop breaks, grinding, you're there sitting on your laptop in the office, and you decide to have a 3.5 minute break so that you can quickly run to the coffee machine, grab the coffee, run back to your desk, chug the coffee, burn your throat, just so you can literally have a bit of a break before actually getting into the work again. Imagine in that moment, your boss comes in, sees you, chilling by the coffee machine, thinks, oh, taking a break, are we? And just says that sly comment, and you're like, oh my God, you have no idea, right? What if that boss could have a highlight reel of the hours you're putting in, of the results you're getting, of the relationships you're building on behalf of the company, of the brilliant spokesperson you're being for the brand? There is so much power in having your boss see that highlight reel. All you need to do is click a button and they see it. And in this case, that button is posting on LinkedIn. So the first response I have to that question is embrace where you're at now. Regardless of what the company is, there is going to be some kind of brand around it. Hopefully it's a positive brand. And so, talk about it. You as a business have just held a webinar. You as a business have just won a new client. You can celebrate that too. Second part is, if you want to kind of distance yourself from the company for whatever reason, then, think about your life, think about your interests. Boom, we've got work here. We'll focus us on work for a minute. Within work, we've got the company, we've got your journey, we've got the industry. Let's keep it super simple. Sure, boom, out goes the work. We're not going to mention it, but we can still talk about the journey. You can talk about the learnings you've had in pitching. You can talk about the big presentation that you're worried about, and so much more. And then on the industry, let's say, you want to remain in startups, or you want to remain in AI or fintech or insurtech, then share what you think is interesting to the wider audience. I think a really good way of thinking about this is take a WhatsApp group, fill that WhatsApp group with the boss you want to have, the colleagues you want to work with, and the people that you've met in the past who are really gunning for you and want you to do well in your career. What things would you throw into that WhatsApp group? So you would talk about the promotion that you just got. Hey guys, I got a promotion. But then you'd also talk about the fact that Intuit just brought MailChimp. You may also talk about the fact that, what's another recent one? There have been 2 humongous 400 mil and 500 mil seed funds that have just been raised. One of them was by Greylock. And, what does that mean for the startup world? And there are other interests. So if you want to distance yourself from the company specifically, think about things going on in the industry, comment on those, and try to kind of reflect on how that makes you feel, and so on.
Excellent, thank you. Wonderful, wonderful answer. Next one comes from, I hope I get the pronunciation right, Monsieur, who says, as a founder, I constantly battle with the dreaded imposter syndrome. What's the best advice on overcoming that in the context of personal branding?
In the context of personal branding, it's a tough one. I think everyone goes through it. I think if we remove personal branding and just be kind of entrepreneur to entrepreneur, like, it's going to happen. You're not going to be able to get away from it for a while. So just acknowledging the fact that it's normal, everyone suffers from it, is helpful. Second thing is having a separate voice. So a voice that isn't yours. I've spoken to some of our advisors before. One of them turned around once and he was like, you don't need this person. You don't need to do this. What you really need is somebody to have a call with you once a week and tell you you're doing okay. You're doing a good job. Because right now you don't believe it enough. You can't say that to yourself, so you need somebody else too. So on the topic of general imposter syndrome, having somebody there to kind of be a friend and, or a colleague or a mentor, just to kind of, back you up and let you know that you're doing a good job is really helpful, because startups are lonely. It's really difficult. So that's the first piece. In terms of imposter syndrome with regards to personal branding, depending on where you're at, talk about it. Like that can be your content. It can be a great place to start. And we've spoken about the idea of a journey within personal branding before. Great. How awesome would it be to see, for me to follow you and to see a post today after this webinar about the fact that you have imposter syndrome, and then to see a few more posts. And then, within 6 months, all of a sudden you're out there owning it. You are being your own hype person. You're living the life and you're bloody loving it. Like as a viewer, as somebody watching that would be cool. So even delving into the fact that you feel a certain way within the entrepreneurship journey, that is content in and of itself. So I would encourage you to, not necessarily to post, but I would encourage you to think about posting it, because I'm telling you, it would get a good response. And if you're worried about the response, tag me, I'll jump on, I'll drop a like, I'll tell my team to do the same.
Excellent, thank you. A little bit of a different one, another one from an anonymous attendee who says, you've given plenty of examples of male entrepreneurs. How is personal branding played out differently for female entrepreneurs?
Great question. Something that comes up a lot when we work with female clients is that there's more of a worry about kind of being their own hype woman. They feel, if you think back to, and I'm sure people have seen content like this, it's like some people would say that if a female boss is, assertive, she doesn't get called assertive, she gets called bossy, whereas the bloke will be called assertive. And if the guy boss is unhappy, he's still rational, but he has a logical argument. Whereas the woman, people would sometimes say, she's bitching, or just silly sexist language like that. And I think as a result, it's, from what I've seen, based on the clients we work with, it can be more difficult to kind of emotionally overcome that. However, if you look at the amount of funding that goes into female entrepreneurs compared to male entrepreneurs, if you imagine the amount of kind of FTSE 500 CEOs who are female, the amount of recent IPOs by female founders, female CEOs, like there's a big difference. And there is a huge opportunity for female entrepreneurs to own the fact that they are helping to shape the way. They are helping to build the path for others to follow. And if you look at any, female CEO, female business person, and if they're active on social media, you will see that they're not just speaking for themselves. They are building a movement. Whitney Wolf Herd is a really good example of that. If you see the content that she puts up, or even just the kind of the wider press piece, if you look at Sarah Blakely and her content, it's empowering. It's brilliant. So those are my thoughts there.
Excellent. I'm just trying to pick through. So this one comes from Joe, who asks, do you think avoiding vanity metrics around personal brand in the early stages of development is vital to achieve long-term meaningful impact?
Yeah, so when you get a load of likes, it feels good and that's great. But the thing is, when you then don't, you almost want to remove the content. If anyone invests in stocks and shares, they would probably agree that if you're checking your phone the whole time and getting really excited when you got 10% up on your stock, it's almost a bad thing, because it means as soon as you're 10% down, you're going to be pranging. But if you can get to the stage where you check your Hargreaves Lansdown or your AJ Bell app once a week or once a month, and you just don't care about the price fluctuations, you're probably much more of a confident investor. You're probably going to do it much more often and see the returns from that. I think it's the same with personal branding. If you get that excited about a post getting 100 likes versus your usual 30 likes, then it's probably going to be true that if your post only gets 2 likes, you're going to want to delete it. It is very, very, very difficult to get past that though, especially when you're just starting to push out content. So yeah, I've just got to empathize with that, because I've had that. It is bloody difficult. If you put a lot of work into content and it doesn't get the response you want, it's difficult, but just power through, keep going. And if you're really not getting engagement, then think, okay, who am I actually speaking to here? Because nobody's listening. In which case, good way to think about it. If I have time, do we have another 30 seconds?
Yeah, we got another 5 minutes. Yeah.
Wonderful. If you think about walking into a bar full of people, you don't know anyone, there's a stage with a microphone and you're thinking about going up there and talking and, open mic night, sure, why not? Let's say you walk up, one step at a time onto the stage. People are going to see you walking up. They're going to follow you until you're in the spotlight, but they're already having their conversations. You haven't done anything to warrant, getting their attention. So you can start speaking and a few people will listen, sure. But what if you got to the bar 30 minutes early and you went over to each cluster, each group of people, and you introduced yourself and you said, hey, what's going on? This is who I am. Oh, wow. Love love what you're wearing, or whatever it is. What if you start to have little conversations with those people? All of a sudden, when you decide, right, now's my time, and you walk over to that stage, all of a sudden people are thinking, no, he's not going to, is he? And then boom, 1 step, 2 step, 3 step, 4. He's on the stage now, walking towards the microphone, and everyone's like, no way, Joe, he's getting onto this. No, all of a sudden they are waiting for it. You prime them for it. Complete difference. So if you're posting content consistently, and by consistently for weeks, for months, and you're not getting a response, you've got to talk to more people, which in LinkedIn or Twitter or any social media context means, great, it's really good that you're posting. It's great that you're speaking from the stage, but go and have the other conversations first. Go and comment on other people's things. Go and DM other people. Have those conversations so that when they see your post on the newsfeed, they know you. They're ready for it. They're going to comment as well.
Brilliant. We've probably got time for 1, maybe 2 more. So this one comes from Nat, who says, when you're sorry, I'm just rereading it and trying to reword it slightly. So when you are documenting your journey, should you be niche with what you share, or share as much as you can? For example, should I talk about personal life, health goals, personal challenges, etc.?
Mm-hmm. If you're building a personal fitness app, 100% do that, because it aligns really well. Again, really difficult to give these answers without the specific context of what you're building. Because, sometimes if you go too niche, it's not going to get the reach and the viewership, and it won't find the eyes that you want in the first place. So if you think about scrolling through LinkedIn, half the content on there is from people that you're not even connected with, but perhaps you're connected with me. So you see Joe Binder commented on this, and now you have new content on your feed, even if you're not connected with the person. So when it comes to creating content, you need to think, I want, tech developers to see this, or I want fitness fanatics to see this. And yes, they could be interested in this really niche thing, but at the same time, I've got to find a way to get onto their newsfeed in the first place. So there may be an argument to say you've got to make the content a little bit less niche and a little bit more mainstream, so that enough people can engage with it to put it onto your desired audience's feed in the first place. But it's a cop-out answer because I don't know the specifics. So that's the kind of general, but it's difficult to be much more specific, unfortunately.
Oh, yeah, that's totally understandable. So yeah, we've probably got time for 1 more. This is from an anonymous attendee who asks, should a professional with top marketing and PR experience handle their own personal brand themselves and therefore save money and time? Or should they outsource the strategy and then take over and maintain, for instance?
Depends on budget, depends on ROI as well. Because if you're in a 30 grand a year job and you're hoping to get a promotion or hoping to get a job offer, which is a 40 grand or a 45 grand a year, paying somebody on an ongoing basis 30 grand a year, it's just not going to work. It just doesn't make sense. Whereas if you're a business person who can, one deal can be worth, $250,000 and you're paying 30 grand a year, then all of a sudden, completely different context. So that's the first thing I would think about. What's the context? The other thing is, to what extent do you want to build your personal brand? Is this a case of, having a brief level up so that you're not just doing the networking piece in person, but you're also doing it online? Or is this a major, I want to be a dragon on Dragon's Den. I want people to know who I am. I want to put out a book in the next 10 or 20 years. If it's that level of ambition for your personal brand, then it's definitely wise to get an individual or an agency to help put together a strategy. And then you'd also need probably some help. If you've got a full-time job, you would need some help on the execution. But again, just because that's a long-term plan, doesn't mean that for now you can't start.
Okay, excellent. Yeah, we're out of time, I'm afraid. There's still quite a few questions that we haven't been able to get to. I know Chloe has just popped mine and Joe's LinkedIn profiles in the chat function. So if you do want to connect with Joe and kind of put any more questions, I'm sure Joe, you'd be willing.
Yeah, if people send me, when you connect with me, just write GBEA at the start of the message, and I'll try to respond to all of them today. Excellent, thank you very much. Otherwise, you just ignore them, don't you? But no, Joe, thank you so much for the last 45 minutes. It's been really, really insightful. Plenty of advice in there, and I'm sure there's been plenty to take away from for the audience. Just before we do go, if you did want the audience to take 3 key points away from the session, what would they be? Wonderful. Oh wow, my goodness, 3 points. Would say personal branding compounds over time. I would say personal branding creates a gravitational pull around you so that people want to go to you, and they do go to you before you have to go to them. And the third one is start now. There's something you can do literally. It's 12:16 now. You can do it today. Even if it's posting to say that you attended a webinar on personal branding, there is so much content out there. There are so many great things that you have to give to the world. Don't put it off. Start now. Excellent. Thank you so much, Joe. And yeah, thank you for taking the time to be with us today. And thank you everyone who's joined us. And with that, I will pass over to Chloe.
Fantastic. Thank you so much, Joe, for sharing your expertise and knowledge with us today. It's been great to have you with us. We will be back next week at the same time with Lauren Crane of Astrid and Mayu and Ali Francis of Snag Tights as they discuss building an engaged audience with TikTok. If there is anything you'd like to catch up on from today's session, we'll be sending out a replay of the recording later on today, and you can find the replay and future sessions at www.lightbulb-sessions.heysummit.com. Thank you very much for joining us today, and thank you again, Joe and Jonathan.
Thank you. Thanks so much for coming, everyone.